Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2.
I'd like to call this meeting to order, a regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole on Tuesday, October 15th at 6 p.m. in the Germantown Village Hall Boardroom and also can be accessed via WebEx. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with sections 19.83 and 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Roll call shows all members present except for Trustee Kaminsky and Trustee Miller, who both are excused. At this time, we'll go to agenda item 3, which is the approval of minutes. We can take each one individually or both together. On item A, it's minutes from the October 1st, 2024 meeting. Item B is the minutes from the October 8th, 2024 meeting.
Move approval of items A and B as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Trustee Warren. Any discussion on a motion to approve? No discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Going down to new business, item A, the 2025 budget review. We've got 5 items listed, but before we get into item number 1, which is special revenue funds, we'll turn the meeting over to our budget director, Matthew Uselding, to give us any updates and anything else that he has to add in regards to where we are with the budget currently.
Thank you very much. In front of you, I had a small printout regarding the 2025 recommended budget levy overview. We'll be looking at that more towards the end of the meeting as we get to outstanding items, but I wanted to present some different options as it relates to different ways that the village board can adjust the levy for the 2025 recommended budget. Other than that, I'd be happy just to get right into the special revenue funds. So the first special revenue fund we'll go over is the property maintenance fund. This fund has a budgeted revenue of $2,500 and a budgeted expense of $2,500. This fund is mostly used for residential properties that don't maintain their lawns, and we have to have someone come out and cut the grass. We pay that invoice, and then we bill the resident for that dollar amount. So this is just a fund to track those revenues and expenses, and there's really no change year over year.
Questions?
I'll just keep going then.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The next special revenue fund is the Honor Guard. Again, here, this is a special revenue fund with dedicated revenues and expenses. Typically, what we do is we budget a projected revenue and expense, just so there is some budget authority to purchase things out of this account. Again, in the 2025 recommended budget, we have a projected revenue of $1,000 and a budgeted expense of $1,000.
Commissioners? Questions?
The Recreation Facility Fund, this is a fund that helps maintain some of the fields within the village of Germantown. Here, we have a budgeted revenue of $34,000 and a budgeted expense of $20,000.
Questions? Next one.
Historic Preservation. Here we have a budget revenue of remaining flat. Any donations that the Historic Preservation receives is a bonus. Then roughly a projected expense of $846,000. If they didn't have any revenues in 2025, they would just use some of their fund balance to cover those costs.
Okay. Next one.
The Canine Fund, we're having a budgeted revenue of $5,000 and a budgeted expense of $1,000, similar to the previous fund. Any excess revenue is a bonus as they receive several donations throughout the year. And they have a healthy fund balance where they could draw down reserves if a larger expense came up.
Okay. Next one.
Police asset forfeiture. This is a fund that's really no longer in use, but I wanted to include it. There's no budgeted expenses or revenues.
Okay. Is there any reason to keep it?
No, not to my knowledge. I just want to throw it up here just so, because it is a fund we do have.
Chief, did something change in state law that wouldn't allow that to occur anymore? Based on any, anything that you would take in regards to an arrest or a drug conviction?
Some pretty significant changes in what we would receive for asset forfeiture. The vast majority is going to the schools now. Some was trickling in right toward the end there, but those are mostly expended.
Okay. So can you see any reason to keep it going forward?
I would like to just check with the county to see what their feeling on that is. Some of the other revenue coming down.
All right, that's fair. Thank you. Next.
Here's the newly created library capital fund. In 2024, the county increased their contributions. For the last couple of years, they had not been contributing to municipalities. Starting again in 2024, we're expecting the county to continue contributing to the county library capital. And as a result, this past summer, the village board created a new fund to separate out those funds dedicated to the library. We're projecting a revenue of $23,000 in 2025 with no expenses.
Trustee Jan Miller.
So, we exchanged a couple of emails, Matt, and, so can you explain to me, we also had a resolution to transfer the, fund of about 877,000. That was in the, Washington County, Library Offset Capital Fund.
Yep.
And, can you explain why it's not in here? Is this just this year's revenues or next year's revenues?
Yep. So the funds that were transferred were an asset fund. So that was an investment fund of $880,000 that was being restricted for the library's purpose. These accounts are only budgeted revenues and expenses. It wasn't considered a revenue. It was the creation of a new fund. In the 2024 audit, what you'll see is it'll have its own fund page, but where it will show the overall fund balance of that $906,000 that I showed or emailed you earlier.
Okay, and then are we, you said it's an investment fund, so is that invested in what?
So those funds are invested, you know, all of our funds are invested technically, right? Anything that's in reserves, we have in investments. Those funds are commingled with all the other village investments and are in a variety of different securities, whether it's treasuries or other smaller investments. It's not one lump sum. That 906,000 isn't lumped into a CD, for example. It's split out amongst a variety of different investment options. And that's managed by Ehlers.
It is Ehlers?
Yep.
Okay, and do you have an idea of what you believe the 2024 return on investment will be? Should be pretty good, wouldn't it?
I don't know if it'll be as good as it was last year. Last year we had some pretty strong investments in unrealized gains. I can reach out to Ehlers and see where we're tracking year to date. They would have a better understanding than I would.
So we have this pool of funds, just so I'm clear, and that library fund is within there, within this huge thing.
Yep.
It's all being invested by Ehlers and among other things. And the average is that given to each individual fund that's in there?
Yep. Based on
proportionately.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So if it's, $10 million in investments, and there's $1 million in library capital reserve, 10% of the investment earnings go to the library capital.
Okay.
Yep. So it's all reallocated proportionally to the number of investments.
And this happened at the end of the day. So do each one of those, the library, let's say there's, I don't know, administrative fund. Anyway, whatever the funds are, do they have a separate line item or do they have a spot?
No, so they're all commingled into one line item. So we have different investments, and we'll call one investments, general fund. So that's typically all the general fund investments, all the special revenue investments, all of the water investments, all the utility investments. All of those monies are commingled and then invested together in different options.
So it's a library tracking ETF is what you got going on, Matthew, basically.
Correct. And then so we, not to go down the rabbit hole on investments, but then we have a separate bucket for each borrowing that we do, and those are invested separately as well.
Oof. Okay, problem solved. So, so do you have any, so when we get this county library offset fund now starting in 2024, going forward for the library, does this get to be put into any kind of investment fund?
Yep, it'll all be invested throughout the year. So any cash we get, that'll get invested, proportionate to the amount of money we get from all the other investments. So next year, if we get $23,000 and we don't spend anything, that $23,000 will get invested and accrue interest. And then if in the event we need some of those funds, we'll either liquidate the investment or we'll have some standing in cash and spend it that way. But in the case of the library capital fund, all those funds are invested because we have no budgeted expenses. We're not planning on spending any of it, so we invest it all.
Thank you.
So, but I just want to be clear, there's no separate library fund. It's commingled with everything else. And you're just tracking the assets, the contributions, and the withdrawals against those funds. And you're paying out whatever the interest earned as a percentage of the total library assets that are invested with everything else.
Correct. As it relates to investment, I mean, there is a separate library capital fund as it relates to the budget, but as it relates to investments, yes, they're all just commingled and we allocate it out. Yep.
Anybody else have their hand up? Trustee Baum, did you have your hand up?
Nope.
Okay, anything else? Or library capital? Okay,
All right, I'll move on to police impact fees. For most of the impact fees, I did decrease them slightly just based on the 2024 actuals and the projected decrease in development. That is with the understanding that next year might be a little more different than what we have budgeted, as we're currently going through an impact fee study to see if we need to raise or change the impact fee rates. So for the police impact fees, we're budgeting a revenue of just under $14,000, and there's no budget expense.
next.
For the fire impact fees, we're budgeting a revenue of just under $19,000, and there's no budgeted expense.
Next.
For library impact fees, we're budgeting a revenue of just over $8,000, and there's no budgeted expense. For parks, we're budgeting roughly $30,000 in impact fee revenue, and there's no budgeted expense.
Next one.
For the Fire Explorer program, we're budgeting donation revenue at $2,000, and then budgeted expenses are $2,000.
Right.
For senior van replacement, budgeting a revenue of $2,000, and there are no budgeted expenses.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to the Village Health Fund. So the village has its own health fund. This year, we're projecting revenue increases of about $21,000. This is largely driven by the increased personnel in police and fire and their contributions towards the health plan premiums. On the expense side, I took the portion amount of increase on the revenue side and increased the projected health claims paid for a total expense of about $2.6 million, which is slightly under the projected revenues of $2.9 million. Then any excess different will fall down the fund balance as we work to build up that fund balance over the next couple of years.
No questions? Next.
On the dental side, similar to the health fund, I increased the premiums by the proportion amount of salaries or the portion of personnel within the police and fire departments. And that's where we'll see those premium increases. And I did similar on the expense side to increase them to offset. And the dental fund historically has ran balanced. The premiums have typically covered all of the expenses.
Okay.
Moving on to the tax increment districts, for TID 6, there are no major projects planned in 2025. So the only projected revenue we're going to see is the increment of about $650,000. On the expense side, the major expenses are the debt service payments totaling about $515,000.
Trustee Jan Miller?
Could you explain what the other financing uses are? What is that category?
Yep, that is debt service principal and debt service interest.
Okay. And
Any other questions on TIF 6? Trustee Cutts?
The tax increment, the 650 or projecting, does that just sit in there or what happens to it?
So that is used to pay the expenses. So mostly the debt service principal and debt service interest. Anything else falls down to fund balance.
So
And
that's-
then how it works is if the fund balance can cover the remaining costs, then that TID closes the following year.
Okay, so the tax money coming in basically pays the expenses for the year.
Correct.
And then some, yeah.
Correct.
Thank you.
Trustee Warren?
Some of the numbers we're seeing here for the TIDs, is this the same as the numbers we've seen from the reports and the presentations that Ayers has been providing
Yeah,
us?
so typically what I do, at least on the revenue side, is I'll take what their projected tax increment is. This could change depending on assessed value, so this number could be slightly higher, slightly lower. I typically take what's in the Ayers reports and use that to project the tax increment. And then on the debt side, I just look at our debt service schedule, and that's where I allocate that. TID 6, there's not much going on in TID 6, so it's mostly just debt service payments.
Any other questions? TIF 6? TID 7?
I feel like, there we go. TID 7, the major project within TID 7 we're projecting for 2025 is the Freistadt Road to High Point Pass, or Freistadt Road, High Point Pass to Interstate 41. Here we're seeing, revenues. I have projected revenues for the increment of $370,000. Running through the state numbers that I received on Monday, this is actually slightly lower. It's probably gonna be closer to $600,000 in increment, which will be good for TID number 7. On the GO side, the 1.87 million is for the Freistadt Road project. Other expenses within the TID include the trail plan or the trail plan that was funded back in 2022, I believe, the 700,000, and then the debt service payments.
Questions? No. Okay.
TID 8 tax increment revenues are projected to be just under 2.9 million, with additional revenues from GO bonds totaling just under 5 million for total revenues of $7.8 million within TID number 8. The major projects within TID 8 for 2025 are Rockfield Road and High Point Pass, totaling just under $5 million.
Trustee Jan Miller?
So, Rockfield Road, the Gateway, Goldendale to Gateway, and High Point Pass, Holy Hill to Railroad. So we have 2, but I thought we had High Point Pass in 7.
Down by Freistadt Road.
Pardon me?
That one was down by Freistadt Road. Opposite end.
And this is supposed to be for 2025?
Correct.
That was passed as a amendment to TIF 8 and TIF 7 together. It went through joint review board and before this body and the plan commission.
It's a lot of road. So the geo bonds have not been purchased yet?
Correct. We have issued for High Point Pass in TID 7 or TID 9.
Yeah, we're actually in the process of the bond sale or actually they're promissory notes to be technical, but for High Point Pass from Holy Hill to the railroad, that was approved by the village board about a month ago. The sale date is actually October 16th. Yep.
Other questions? TID 8? Did not.
Excuse me.
Trustee Chan Miller.
One other question.
Mhm.
I don't have this memorized. Where does, which TID does JW Speaker reside?
7.
Okay. So 7. So they're in, arrears with us. They've short paid or whatever the term is. And we've had this situation for a couple of years. And I'd like to know what is going on with that situation.
We've had some discussions, you could call it negotiations with JW Speaker about their situation. There are some requirements in the development agreement that
Right.
they are required to meet certain thresholds on the front end. The village has some obligations on the back end of the development agreement. So the village attorney and I have had several meetings with them discussing that situation. Plan to have something back to the village board for the end of the year, some recommendations on how we might be able to work out an agreement that would be that would work well for JW Speaker and also meet the village's needs.
Okay, well, it is going to happen before the beginning of the year.
That's the plan as these discussions go on. I would say that if there's no action taken, excuse me, if there is no action taken, the existing development agreement is in force, and then they are required to make those shortfall payments.
At this juncture in time, they're required to make those shortfall payments anyway, correct?
Correct. I believe that 2024 is the first year that those shortfall payments would be required.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we're
Not several years, just past year.
past 2 years
Past year,
Yeah, but-
2024.
this year.
Right. Not several years, just this year.
So, well, I hope we can come up with an agreement or just have them pay the shortfall. That would make sense. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anything else on TID 7 or 8? Go to 9.
TID 9 projected revenues are just under $400,000, with most of that coming from the tax increment. On the revenue side, there's no major projects within TID 9. The largest expense are project administration and debt service payments.
Trustee Chan Miller.
Can you explain the street improvement line? We've actually spent 3 million, and then but the change is Is that completely paid for then? Are we paying it out of the TID? I would imagine that was for the street to the DPW. Was that what it was?
That was actually the Dodges Bay Road reconstruction and part of the street from Dodges Bay Road into the DPW site.
Okay. And is the actual, so the actual is 3 million.
Yeah,
Was
that
was
does,
that on budget?
that does, yes, that does include the water main improvements and the sewer main improvements. Those get allocated out at the end of the year as part of the audit.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for TID 9? Okay,
Before you is the 2025 debt service fund. I wouldn't take too much substance in the change between 24 and 25. You'll see there are rather larger changes. This is mostly because after speaking with the auditors, they wanted us to remove TID debt and utility debt as part of the debt service fund and just pay them out of their own funds. The current projected debt service fund has a debt service levy of about $5.2 million. This is about an 8% increase over the 2024 adopted budget. One of the options over the last couple of weeks, the administrator and I have been looking at different options to reduce the debt service levy. One option that the village board will have available to them, and we can discuss more during outstanding topics, is to use some of the DPW building contingency fund to lower the debt service payment to keep that flat for 2025.
village administrator.
If I can just expand on that a little bit. When we began the DPW facility project, we issued $42 million in debt, both for the facility itself as well as the infrastructure around the facility. We included in that project about a $2 million contingency to help make sure we wanted to make sure that we did not go over budget in the project. And that was part of that $42 million that we borrowed. When we issued that debt, we issued it using general obligation bonds. And this is getting into the weeds a little bit on how municipal debt works, but bonds are limited legally by state statute in what they can be used for. So these bonds that we issued for the Public Works building are bonds that can only be used for a couple of purposes. One is for Public Works facilities. The other thing that they can be used for, that the bond proceeds can be used for, is they can be applied towards debt service on those bonds. So at this point in the project, and I think most of you, if not all of you, have seen the new DPW facility, it's substantially complete. There's a few odds and ends that need to get wrapped up there yet. And also included in that project budget was demolition of the old DPW facility, which should be underway very soon. At this point, there's about $730,000 that remain in the contingency fund for the DPW facility. And it's clear that we won't need $730,000 in contingency at this point. There aren't any significant public works facilities projects that are on the radar at this point. We've just built the facility. So one option for the board would be to use a portion of that contingency, say $397,000, and apply those funds towards debt service in 2025. And what that would do is reduce the property tax levy, the total property tax levy, by that amount from what was recommended by staff in September. So it is a way and that would leave adequate funds in the contingency budget for anything that might come up during the DPW, the removal of the old facility and wrap up of some final things.
Trustee Jan Miller.
Was the demolition of the old DPW included in the borrowing originally?
Yes.
And how much was that fund?
I want to say it was $700,000 or $800,000. Yeah, I'm getting the thumbs up back there.
Okay. And the demolition has not been started?
It has not started. The building is at this point empty. I think they maybe have started some cleanup on the inside, removal of some items, but the wrecking ball is not out yet.
Are we responsible for any of the cleanup at this point? Wasn't the DNR after us to do some cleanup? Or
Well,
somebody?
there's an underground storage tank there is a septic system that needs to be removed. That all is included in that $700,000 or $800,000. And that project has gone out to bid. Those bids are back and the contracts have been awarded. So we know what those costs are going to be at this point.
And that's 700,000 or 800,000?
Right,
So all of that is included.
correct.
Why would you even keep a contingency?
Well, when we started the project, especially at the time when we started the project, there were a lot of uncertainties. If you recall back when the country was coming out of COVID, there were a lot of supply chain issues. There were issues with the predictability of what building materials would cost was difficult. There were labor shortages, things that could have affected the total cost of the DPW building more than they did. I think that, in part because of the way that the village board approved going forward with managing the contract and, taking a kind of an innovative approach to how we bid those contracts out, how we manage the overall construction project. We didn't need as much of the contingency fund as we might have. So there is money available in it at this point.
Yeah, I understand that. So the question is, why are we, the main part of we're having a tour this Saturday, I think, or next Saturday, thank you. And the building is complete. You've already allocated the money for the tear down of the other DPW, the old DPW. So why do we need a contingency fund yet?
And what I'm saying to the board right now is we're at a point where we don't need all of that money in the contingency fund. And
You said there's probably $730,000.
the contingency fund has in it right now about $730,000. We won't need $730,000 in the contingency fund. So therefore create some options for the village board. And one of those options would be to take roughly $400,000 out of those contingency funds and use them for debt service next year. And what that would do is reduce the property tax levy by $400,000.
Why do we need $330,000 in the contingency fund?
Well, and I don't know that we'll need all of that. We may not. But number one, there is still the possibility that there would be the need for some funds with the demolition and cleanup of the old DPW site. That project, might have, but that's probably more in the range of 10 or 15% of that overall project budget. There still are some closeout issues, some punch list items at the new DPW building that need to be addressed. But could you take $500,000 out? Probably. I think we should leave something in there, something in that contingency fund just until everything is completely finalized and closed out.
Could we have the director of DPW speak to that?
Sure, he's here, and I know he's anxious to speak tonight, so.
Of course you are.
The only other thing that I would add to what the administrator mentioned is that the contingency fund is allowing us to purchase what would typically be owner-provided items for the building, such as furniture. We've installed like network infrastructure, computer network infrastructure, and that sort of thing using contingency. So that wasn't part of the facility, like the building budget, but it's stuff that was needed for the building. And then we just need to make sure that we're all the way through the construction, just for any unforeseens that remain out there in terms of the demolition, in terms of other things in the next couple months that might come up at the new building. And at that point, we can evaluate what to do with the remainder of the contingency.
So have you used any of the contingency on IT or whatever?
Yes.
Okay. How, like, what portion? 100,000, 50? What are we talking about?
I would say between 75 and 100 is a fair guess. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but
If I can interject, so some of this predates our Public Works Director, but the largest expense out of that contingency fund was early in the project for soil stabilization on the site. When we began the project, there was a lot of rain, there was a lot of moisture on the site, so I believe it was about $800,000, $900,000 for soil stabilization expenses to make sure that the soil was dry and compact before we put the foundation of the building on. And that was the largest single expense that came out of the contingency fund.
And the contingency fund was originally 2 million.
Yes.
What do you believe, Matt, that you need for a contingency fund? What amount? What dollar amount?
it's there for a contingency at this point. It's for unknowns, so I can't predict what I don't know right now. But I think it's prudent to save a certain percentage of that. And I think what's the administrator recommended is appropriate to save us some balance until we get through the end of the project. And then we can decide what to do with the remaining funds.
When do you believe that the end of the project, end of the year or?
No, it'll be longer than that. Sometime into next spring, most likely.
Is that for both the demolition and anything you need at the new facility?
Yeah, primarily for demolition. The new facility, as you know, is substantially complete, but they're just getting started with the demo activities at the old site.
Biggest concern would be the buried tanks that are there and what could be found underneath. If any remediation would be needed based on the amount of time that those tanks have been there.
I want to know.
Anything else?
Nope.
Matthew? Thank you, Matt.
It's a little small, but in front of you are the 2025 recommended capital projects by department. The single largest capital project in 2025 is the reconstruction of Division Road, which is totaling about 3.85 million. In addition to the Division Road reconstruction, we also have 1.56 million for the annual 2025 road program. The remaining capital funds are typical projects that we budget through each year, including the addition of squad cars for the PD, some library upgrades, and some smaller upgrades at our parks, Village Hall.
Questions? Comments? Trustee Peeper?
Where are the traffic signals lighting going? And what is Hazer rating?
That's rates the streets as to like potholes and stuff.
Okay,
Those are both items that are GIS updates, so it's a implementation of a new layer in GIS that tracks where everything is, what condition it's in.
we're not adding any signals or lighting?
No, it's just
Gotcha.
accounting for what we have in our GIS system.
Thank you.
Might as well stay there, Matt.
Yep.
No, radio tower UPS replacement? Buildings and grounds?
Yeah, Scott is here in case I come up short on all the backup that you're looking for, but essentially that tower backs up some critical infrastructure, including the internet capabilities for the village. The generator's run its useful life and is in need of an upgrade.
So it's not UPSs aren't generators, they're actual
No, I'm sorry.
backup units.
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I misspoke.
One unit?
UPS, I misspoke.
Okay. Would you be able to provide me the unit, like the part number, specifics on it?
Not at this time, unless Scott has that. Part number, like model of the UPS.
If I can just expand on that while Scott's looking up the specific information. This is, if I have this correct, is the uninterrupted power supply at the radio tower by the fire station?
Yeah. By the fire station or police station?
By the fire
Fire.
station.
Really?
Yeah, that, which is, with one of our connections, we get our internet service from Ethoplex.
And you have a backup?
Yeah, and there were issues with this, earlier this year that did cause some outages. So it does definitely need to be replaced and,
Like what issues that caused outages? So the UPS is literally a backup replacement, like for batteries.
not 100% sure if this
So
is
if the
battery.
internet goes,
just-
out, then the other internet kicks in.
The UPS, it's just a big array of batteries that provides power when the power's out.
Yeah, I know.
Yep.
Yeah. So the UPS failed this year when we had a power outage?
Yes, yeah, so
Power
we
outage,
lost
the
both
UPS.
power and when we lost power, the uninterrupted power supply did not
Gotcha.
the backup.
Okay. That's what I needed. Library remote door access.
That is continuing to expand the door access system that we installed in Public Works. We just had approved at Public Works and Highway and Village Board to implement it here. And it would just be expanding the system to the library as well.
Would it,
Card access,
so we're all gonna get cards?
card or phone like Bluetooth credentials, yeah.
Okay. Where are the trees going?
Well, he's walking up here, the tree, the funding for trees in the budget is in order to meet the comprehensive tree plan.
Sure.
And our 5-year strategy to kind of get back to like a full planting status. And I think Scott has an idea of where the trees are going.
Yeah, generally speaking, with 2024's budget cuts, year one, we're actually doing here this fall. Year one tree planting is a very small or reduced. It went through Public Works and Village Board just a couple weeks ago. Again, the map, if anybody can envision the map that we had, I don't think we have it for a screen here tonight, but if anybody can envision the planting map, that was approved as part of the comprehensive tree plan.
How many trees and in what area, north?
Be
south,
looking
west, east?
we'd be looking south of Mequon, west of Pilgrim, east of Division, and roughly 70 trees.
Are they going along the street? Are they?
Streets,
going
parks, buildings, it'll be a mixture.
Down a bunch of trees in the parks and neighbors were complaining about it. So now why did we cut them down and then now we're going to replant them?
What did we cut down? I'm sorry.
I remember receiving a lot of emails about residents, nope, not the trimming, flat out cutting down in Altbauer
I
Park.
think she's referencing the trees that the residents had planted in the village
Yes.
right away in Altbauer Park.
Cut and then also.
Oh.
invasives,
Yeah,
Fence line.
sure. We did have some residents near Altbauer that were planting trees near the pathway, and we asked them to remove those and so they didn't encroach on the pathway. I don't know if that's the project we're referencing. Wiedenbach Park also had a really large scale We Energies tree removal. There might have been a few questions that came up from residents about that, but that was out of the village's hands.
Have you contacted those residents that were planting those trees and asked them if maybe they would be willing to plant other trees in locations predetermined by the village? Since obviously those residents are passionate about the trees and we just removed them.
I don't think we did go back and ask them if they would like to plant trees elsewhere in the village, no.
The patrol truck. Who's that for and what's it replacing?
The highway department replaces a patrol truck nearly every year. This is widely used or 100%, almost 100% used for plowing snow, snow and ice control. We've got about 22 of those vehicles, 14 of them are primary lead plow route trucks. The others are spare and then what we call slop trucks. So as we move one out of the main plowing category, it moves into a spare route. And then we're constantly assessing. They vary in years from 1996 all the way up to 2024.
So this last winter, when we got a huge dump of snow and some residents were being patient, others were complaining that the streets weren't plowed quick enough, well enough. I was under the impression that it was because of staffing, not because we didn't have enough plow trucks.
I don't think it was because of the trucks or the staffing. I think it was the volume of snow that we got in the period of time that we did. We had nearly 30 inches of snow in a 30-some hour period. So again, after doing this for nearly 30 years, that's a pretty intense snowfall. So again, I think we were kind of
It was very
tackling
heavy,
that.
Yes, I agree. But I've had several neighbors come to me and say that they called the village to ask about the snow plowing and why it was done differently. And they were told, we have a lot of new staff.
Again, unless they were speaking to me directly, I couldn't speak to what somebody else may have told them. I don't believe that we do have new staff, and that is definitely a challenge that we're dealing with. I would make no secret about that. But again, we continue to train. And
So how many patrol trucks are being retired this
there
year?
would be 2 patrol trucks retired this coming year.
And that
Provided
adds,
we get this one approved in the budget.
so those 2 that are being retired, could they last one more year? Both-
Not in a capacity that we're asking them.
But would the 2 of them together be able to equate 1 for a year?
The answer that I will give you is we will always do what we need to do in order to accommodate the wishes of the board. I would caution that the village has done this in the past and we've fallen behind in our patrol truck. We used to have a 12-year roll. We're down to about an 18 to 20-year roll now. So I would just caution that patrol trucks are extremely important. They are the lifeblood of what we do in this village when it comes to snow. And it's probably the best asset we have aside from the person that gets behind the wheel of it. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, we could. I don't know that I would recommend that.
Go for it, Jan.
Just to follow up, so if I'm, if I, if I'm understanding this right,
Recognizing her.
thank you.
Go ahead,
Could I
Jen.
be
Yeah, go ahead. Jen.
recognized? Thank you, President Walter. So we have 22 vehicles, 14 are full-time. So the other 8 are parked?
There are probably 2 of them that are strictly, again, in an extreme circumstance, the equipment could still be put on them. But 2 of them sit with no equipment on them, and those are sitting aside for any kind of an emergency dig that we might have in the wintertime, a water leak,
Sure.
anything of that nature. And then the other 4 are, as we have a breakdown, they're not sitting. I wouldn't say they're sitting. They may be sitting during the operation, but if we have a breakdown or 2, or maybe even 3, those trucks come back to the shop, and while they're being repaired, these spares are going out and continuing to do the job they need.
So what's the oldest truck and what's the newest truck?
2024 would be the newest truck we have. 1996 is the oldest truck we have. Sorry.
If this is approved.
But currently you have a 2024.
2024 is being built right now. Yes. Ordered in early January, and we try to get ahead of the curve. It takes about a year to build them. The chassis is built by the truck manufacturer, and then once we take delivery of that, it goes out to Madison, and Burke Truck and Equipment puts the actual equipment package on it. The entire process takes about a year, which is why you see us bring it very early in the year so that we can hopefully have that on the road by the following winter.
I'll let Bob ask question. For you, sorry. Oh, Dean gets to choose.
What? Are you through with your questions, Trustee
Yes,
Miller? You said the oldest was 1995?
96
Six.
is still the oldest we have.
And the newest is for last year, and there's 22 of them?
Again, I think if I know where you're maybe going with that, an important thing to note is we don't get rid of necessarily the oldest truck. We get rid of the truck that needs to leave the fleet. So we may keep something older because we're having problems with something that's newer, if that makes any sense.
Because that's a 29-year swing.
Obviously, that 96 is hung around a little bit longer because it's in better condition than some of the other things we're getting rid of.
All right, Trustee Warren.
A couple of comments. So I did a ride along during that big storm, that Armageddon storm. And my experience as far as removal, the amount of snow that we had was amazing. What these guys did to get that snow removed in a timely fashion. I think it was just the residents weren't used to this much snow and how long it actually takes. But I mean, hats off to our crews for what they actually accomplished on that. Heck, the snowplow I was in even got stuck trying to plow. That shows you how much snow that we had. The other point I wanted to make is that if we're trying, I trust Scott as far as knowing when trucks need to be replaced. And you complained or you commented that you got a lot of calls because of the slow removal. The last thing that we need is that if we're pushing these trucks too far, and then they have breakdowns out in the field during this operation, that'll slow things up a lot. So if you want to get more calls, that's the way to do it, to not trust Scott and push these vehicles way too far. That's not very wise and a good way to spend money. The other comment that I want to make is that with this new facility we have, a new public works facility, and the ability to work and lift vehicles now, you think there's a chance that the positive side is that we could extend maybe the life a little bit longer because we can do better maintenance on these vehicles because of the facility that we have now? Trying to get a positive spin here.
Yeah, I'm trying to help you. Again, I think the facility is certainly going to aid in any kind of maintenance that we do on any of our equipment, whether, again, we just commissioned our large Rex lift a couple weeks ago, and it was neat to see the ladder truck on that. And so again, it's going to aid us in everything we do. I think the important thing to remember is, and I've kind of talked about this at committee level too, when we talk about these trucks, the conditions in which we put these trucks and then expect them to do their job. Even when we talk about like a pickup truck, for instance, you know, you might hear the mileage on that pickup truck and think, well, that's a fairly low mile vehicle. But the conditions that it's in, the things that we're asking it to do, that's why the life cycle is a little bit lower. I'd like to say yes, hopefully we will be able to preserve the trucks longer. But on the flip side of that, again, going with that replacement cycle, I think is just super important that we try to stay on that as best as possible.
Trustee Warren, if I could just build off of that, I think one of the major benefits of the new DPW building is, you know, I can't speak to extending the life. I'm not a mechanic. It's not my area of expertise by any means. But I think one thing that the new DPW building will help with is less, you know, out of house, you know, mechanic work, where we can keep some of those more expensive fixes in house and save some costs there. So I think there's more of a cost savings than an extended life argument to be made.
Good point. Thank you.
If I could just add one thing that I'm planning to do with the department over the fall and winter is to come up with a complete 10-year plan for our fleet. And Scott has maintained, you know, a document that's in very good shape. And like Trustee Warren said, there's very good reason to trust his opinion on this stuff. But I think it's just a matter of documenting the process and presenting it to you folks, and really analyzing things for key issues like, is there opportunity to reduce the fleet in any areas? Is there an opportunity to extend life cycles? Maybe it would find the opposite, and maybe there's certain equipment groups that we're extending too long and we need to shorten their life cycles. But I think we should take a step back and do that analysis. In the meantime, I think that this is one request, and we had some other large requests that didn't come forward this year, anticipating that we were going to be doing some of that study. But this is one that's, I think, really critical to keep on the 1-year replacement cycle.
And you budgeted for that analysis, right?
No,
I
that'd
thought
just be
you
an
put it
in-house
forth in
effort.
your budget to create a position.
Oh,
do
well, that could certainly help. Yeah. But
Okay.
it would be an in-house effort.
Trustee Hudson.
Gil, please. Yeah, I'm not going to enter the great truck debate. I have a question for Gil.
Oh, for Gil.
One more truck question, if that's okay. It's one, it's quick. Promise. One. What happens to the trucks when you are getting rid of them? Where do they go? Do you auction them off? Do you sell them? Do you what happens to them and where does the money go from it?
Any truck that we sell as the village, any equipment that we sell as a village goes on Wisconsin surplus and it's auctioned off. And then depending on which department is getting rid of it, it ends up back in their revenue account. So if it's a patrol truck, it ends up in the highway revenue account, fire equipment, police equipment, so on and so forth.
Hudson.
Gil, please. $40,000 Kinderberg, please.
Oh, for improvements, yes. A couple years ago, when I first came here, I budgeted to do some improvements to the fields and to the fencing of some of the fields, extending the backstop and so forth. But I still have a couple parks that baseball heavily uses that I would like to finish improving all the fields and the fences, starting out with the backfield, outfield fence at Hop Strauss. Most of the posts are starting to come out of the ground, and the line posts are needing repairs and replacement. So I'd like to be able to do that, and it would be a cost of $10,860. At Frystaff Field, that's the one over at Fireman's Park. The backstop fence is curling up, and
Gil, Is this for Kinderberg improvements or what? So the question is, what are we spending $40,000 for Kinderberg improvements? That's what my question is.
Well,
Or is this for more than Kinderberg?
those were, the Kinderberg improvements were related to the issue of people driving on the
Bollards.
on the trails. So it was to look at the various entry points where people are at times driving through the park and creating a safety issue.
This money is for
Yes,
$40,000.
yes.
Thank you.
My apologies, yes.
Appreciate the answer. Next.
See if anybody else had their hand up, but trustee Peeper. You had gone several times already. I was gonna give somebody that hadn't gone.
I haven't been able to ask Gil questions now, have I? Yeah, the truck 437. But it's under parks.
Go ahead.
347, that's you, Gil.
437.
437.
Oh, it's Scott again. Hang on, don't go away, Gil, because I want to know what's going on at Fireman's Park too. And the other park.
Truck 437 is again just another frontline pickup truck. Again, on the building side of things, similar to the street side. So we're getting rid of an older truck, 2004 GMC, 157,000 miles, replacing it with a new vehicle.
Are you having issues with that truck?
I mean, we maintain every truck. I mean, it comes in and out of the shop. I mean, there's no specific issues that we're getting rid of it for. It's just age at this point. And again, that whole conditional thing, it's 157,000 hard miles.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then the improvements at Helpstrasse, Freistadt, and Fireman's, Gil?
Yeah, the
Yep, go for it. Hang on, he's got a truck question.
Truck question.
How about you all just come up here and stay here?
When we get to these questions about vehicles, I think it would be a great assistance to those on the village board if we could have a description of what we are replacing, right? So
Sure.
I have full confidence in the judgment, but I think it would be great knowledge to know that we're retiring a vehicle that's 20 years old with 175,000 miles on it.
Yep.
It makes the decision much easier.
Absolutely.
Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Peeper? Any more truck questions or are you back on parks? Okay.
Yes, what I'm hoping to do is do some more fencing repairs, replace the fencing at Freistadt, add dugouts down there like I've done at Friedenfeld and Hopstrasse. Kinderberg ballpark, I would like to be able to put a mesh netting above the backstop there as well to stop balls from going into the park like I have at Hopstrasse and Friedenfeld. And again, add dugouts and chain link fence to Kinderberg as well as that baseball field is starting to be more heavily used by the older kids, and they're in need of some additional fencing and backstops for that. So altogether, I'm looking at about $47,000 requested.
Well, if you take the Kinderberg plus the Freistadt, Helpstrasse, and Fireman's, you're at 133,000. I added that up quickly. And that's all for baseball, like baseball fields?
No. He's got the ballards for the Kinderberg improvements are not necessary.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm sorry, yeah, the Ballards are a separate.
Gotcha, so it'd be 93,000.
Well, when I was confused, the Ballards is out of the parks maintenance budget. It's not out of the
Yeah, I'm
recreation.
talking about the Freistadt, Helpstrasse, and Fireman's Park, those budgets, 43,000 plus 50,000. So 93,000, right? And those are
Well-
all for baseball improvements?
No, no, the 50,000 I was asking for is to try to look at improving the floor system at the fire station. Right now, as deep as all the trucks have moved out of there and no longer will winter in there, we'd like to be able to come in with a flooring system as we use that.
I'm going to recommend that that is not put into the capital right now because we don't know what's going on with the fire station in the next coming years. I wouldn't propose to spend $50,000 on a new floor, and especially knowing that there's asbestos in part of the floor in that building. That can open up a can of worms. So that was the Fireman's Park renovations.
Correct.
For the floors, Gil? All 50?
Well, yeah, that was kind of what I was hoping to do, was start. I know I have to go through the Economic Commission and start having talks about the future of Fire Park, but right now we don't have a community center. And we make about $200,000 out of Fireman's Park with our summer program that we do there. And then we use that for year-round activities as well. So I would love to be able to start having discussions on how possibly over the coming years that we could look at converting that into a community center, which also makes economic sense since we're generating quite a bit of revenue off of it.
But I wouldn't recommend to replace the floors right now when we don't have a use for it, a goal for it, a vision for it.
Well, we do have, I mean, it's used almost on a daily basis.
It's used for storage right now.
No, it's used for programs.
Not that area that you're talking about.
Yes, the area we're talking about that goes down the middle of the floor, it is a grade for drainage for trucks.
And kids go in there.
And kids go in there, yes.
I've only seen kids in the finished area.
I think he just said, and when he led his conversation or his reply back with is now that all the trucks have been removed and it's not used for storage
There
anymore.
weren't trucks in there before either. Not when I was in there the 2 times.
Scott, we store trucks in there.
There was one I saw way off in the corner.
We have fire trucks, we have other, usually it's been full, especially during the winter months.
Do you need a motion from me to remove that?
Want to make that motion, yes, you can.
Well, I think it's premature to spend $50,000 on a floor when we don't even know what it's going to be used for.
But make that motion.
So I make a
Steve.
motion to remove the $50,000 from Fireman's Park renovations.
Motion made. We need, do we have a second? More time.
Let's just piss away money.
One motion made.
That's not,
We have a second. Motion fails for lack of a second. Gil, I got a question. You're still
Yes, sir.
get into the reasons why you wanted the
Seriously.
floor replaced, and is it for additional activities and it's to fill a floor drain right now that would be considered hazardous? So you're not looking to lift that old asphalt?
no, sir, no, just to level it out where instead of where it's drainage, you'd have a level floor in there. So where we can conduct our, like I said, we have 3 months. We use it for our summer kids club program and then year-round instructional programs.
Okay. And so that 50,000 is all going into the truck base? That were the fire trucks?
Well, it would take about that much to create a flooring in there, yes.
Are they taking it completely out and then repouring it as all brand new? They just work in the middle of the grate to get the grate out?
Well, it depends. I would have to, I would try to get an engineer to come in and look at it and figure out the best route to do that.
So this is just a ballpark?
Yes.
Trustee Hudson?
So has this been discussed? And I apologize. I've been traveling the last couple of months, and I do have to acknowledge that my attendance at the Park and Rec meetings has not been 100%. Has this been discussed at any of the Park and Rec meetings that I've missed? Because I don't recall this at any of the ones that I was there.
No,
Okay, so this is something that we are seeing for the first time.
that is correct, yes.
Okay. And is there, and again, I apologize for my ignorance. Is there some overall vision for the old fire station that has been discussed or something that we are doing with it that I missed?
Currently, is there, I know that,
Thank you.
that
Gil.
they're,
I'm asking the village administrator.
oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You-
Again, my attendance has not been perfect.
This is a new
This is a new
idea.
item that we're
This is a
seeing
new
for the
idea
first
and a
time
new,
here.
a new concept that's come forward. I think that what we have seen over the past 6 years that the Park and Rec Department has been using Fire Station 1 is that the programming there has grown a great deal. As Gil mentioned earlier, it is a place where the rec program does generate a large portion of their revenue. And it does seem to be a good location and have a lot of the qualities in a building that they need for that. I would also say as we talk about this, and I think Gil brought this forward, seeing an immediate, both a need and an opportunity in that area. I also do think that there is a need to look at the building as a whole and do some planning for that for the future.
And so, in respectfully, finding out about this at the budget meetings perhaps is not the best way to convey this news to the village board. Just a thought. Just a thought. If we vote, I'm
Go
almost
ahead.
done. I'm
Go ahead.
almost done. If we vote to include the money in the budget, there is a separate vote that needs to take place to authorize the spending of the money, correct?
There's a separate vote to authorize the capital spending as proposed or changed by this board, yes,
And that's early next year?
by February.
If I could, there's actually multiple additional approvals.
We would need to vote on the capital, which President Walter is saying, but then the committee and the village board would also need to vote to make the individual expenditure, correct?
Yes,
And
Sorry.
it's a multi-part question.
okay.
And at that time, are we going to know what the vision for this building is? Because what I don't want to do is piecemeal this. That's how costs add up very, very quickly. Is that the plan?
What I can say is there's a few steps in this process. So, number one, the budget gets adopted on November 18th. For the capital projects, we'll be back to the village board in March for the bond issuance and the borrowing related to that. So that's another time this is before the village board. In addition to that, the individual contracts for the work have to be approved. So that is something where I believe that the Park and Rec Director will be presenting this to the Park and Rec Commission multiple times between now and any of those other approvals.
Will there be a vision statement as to what we're doing with this building at some point in there?
I think that needs to be a part of it, yes.
Thank you.
Trustee Warren,
Couple of comments and then I have a truck question. I agree with trustee Hudson and trustee Pieper that this is not the place to find out about this. You know, I'd like to see like we study the heck out of a lot of things, I think there should be something, some kind of study to figure out what would be the best use for this facility. How can we use it? Is it cost effective to do that, or is it better just tear it down or move to a different building? So to hear it here I was surprised too, to hear that. I mean, to redo this floor, is there like imminent danger or hazard to how you are currently using it? Is that what is prompting the urgency to redo this floor?
Well, it's definitely floor meant for trucks and drainage purposes. It's not meant for activities, for
And
sure.
what is the hazard with activities?
I'm not sure that there's a real hazard at this point. I mean, that
Then
with-
why is there an urgency to replace this floor for $50,000?
again, was just to make it a more multi-purpose floor for the activities for the kids, so that we have a, as Trustee Pieper pointed out, in the past, we've had trucks, so we haven't utilized that area as much. But now we're trying to branch out, utilize more of the area. So just looking at trying to make improvements to make it better and more user for the children, for the people that we cater to.
It's a concrete floor right now? A
Correct.
sealed concrete floor? I don't know how that prevents children from doing things what they want on it, but anyway,
Right in the middle, it's not,
well,
not
modify the grade. Asbestos, you don't have to worry about. It's non-friable. If you're not tearing it up, it's not a hazard. So you don't have to worry about that.
touch it.
If Trustee Pieper would present the motion again, I would second it.
I make a motion to remove this from
Been
capital.
recognized. I have
Okay.
questions.
Okay,
In
I still have a
regards
truck question.
here tonight, and what I think is surprising to everybody is that as the building stands, we've made $200,000 off of it in regards to the amount of programs that are going through there now. And I would imagine most of those are kids club. And most of the activities that you've held there, or the kids club activities, or where you're, say, holding the kids, but where you're having them, is in what would be considered that front office area, and not really anywhere near that truck bay. Because it's a lot of equipment was, there's just a lot of racking, and I remember racking and just a very open ceiling environment, so not conducive to even trying to hold heat or electric, or air conditioning in that area. So to expand that building for what it's already giving us, which is $200,000 in revenue to the Park and Rec Department, I think Gil is trying to be proactive to bring other activities in there that may be spent at other buildings that we either rent or have fees against to help offset some of that. So it's not a bad idea, and it's probably a less expensive way to expand that area to a more usable format by, if anything, just filling that drain in with some quick and be done with it. But I think it's proactive, but I think what surprised me the most about what was brought forward with this is that as it stands, it makes $200,000. That's great and positive, for the village, and kudos to Park and Rec for using it in that way.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but I'm still not convinced that if it's currently working and we're generating 200,000, I don't see why there's an urgency to replace this floor. Truck question. Scott?
Quick question.
Feel like I shouldn't, but can I just add something real quick to Gil's topic? One thing too, that it's maybe a little bit of a change, and I'm certainly not swaying anybody one way or another. Agree with a lot of the things that were said. A lot of the programming that was happening at the DPW, the old DPW facility, is moving to the recreation building. I think like we just helped move archery and set up archery there. So there are some different things that will be happening there that weren't happening there before. Anyway, truck question.
Because of the floor?
No, because of the loss of
Okay,
their use at the old DPW.
good. I'm all for it. Last truck question. Just to get my head around this. So we're fully staffed now with the mechanics, correct?
We are fully staffed with mechanics. Yeah.
Okay. what can your mechanics do other than changing oil? I mean, can they replace an engine? Can they replace a transmission? Are they that capable and you have?
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes, they are that capable. We are tearing one of the trucks apart and tearing the transmission out of it. The transmission will be sent into a transmission shop for repair,
Sure.
but like the removal of the transmission and the reinstallation will happen in our shop.
Okay.
It's
So
not
it's-
uncommon that like the top of the engine of a squad car is tore apart in our garage if it needs work.
Okay.
We do have very, very skilled mechanics.
Saving a lot of money because we can do it, and that's all part of your equation as far as the rotation cycle on all of these vehicles.
I mean, it's all a factor, 100%, right? And so again, when we're just talking about, I think the place that the village doesn't want to end up in is, you know, when we talk about having spare trucks that are sitting or waiting to go out, we don't want to have a fleet of those. We don't ever want to be in a position where more of our fleet is that than the newer, ready-to-go equipment.
All right, thank you.
And the new lift in the Department of Public Works allows us to work on fire engine as well to get them up, and any repairs that would have to be with axles or transmissions we can do with fire engines, where before it always had to be sent out or towed to wherever they had to be fixed, and the cost to tow them there and then to fix them or do any type of work on them in a remote location is, you know, is that much higher.
Previously, any fire equipment would have normally been worked on outside of the DPW facility, not in the garage, but outside. Or if it was winter time, we would try to take care of that work at the fire station itself if we could. But yeah, that's a great point.
So the point I wanted to make is that we get sticker shock when we see this $300,000 for patrol trucks. But I want everybody to understand that we are doing what we can to stretch the life of these vehicles out, because we all understand how expensive they are. And it's cheaper to maintain them than to keep buying new trucks at a more frequent cycle.
Right.
Trustee Peeper.
I'd like to know how that fire station number 1 generates $200,000 a year in revenue when I just went through the whole entire Park and Recs packet for both summer and fall, and there's very little in there of actual things that are happening there. I think I counted 4 or 5 out of hundreds.
Well, we run the summer program, the fire station's one of our sites, and that generates probably close to 160,000.
One of how many sites? Isn't it like 5?
5 sites, yes,
Sites
yes,
that you have the kids club at?
during the summer.
Yeah. But the fire station can only have X amount of kids.
Correct. All the sites
Yeah.
are limited to the amount of kids that we can have.
Yeah.
And then we run the TOTS program. We have arts and crafts. We have all kinds of other programs year round in there that generate the rest of that revenue that would,
I counted about like Miss Julie's Music Fund, Miss Julie's Music Parties, Miss Julie's Music for Fun for Families, Miss Julie's Babies Music Funds, which a lot of these kind of overlap. I didn't see much else other than the Oodles of Art and Tot Time. So it's like mostly toddlers, and toddlers aren't going to be running around in that area anyway. I make a motion to remove the $50,000 from capital.
Motion made and seconded, discussion. Trustee Chan Miller.
I have a question for Gil. Gil, yeah, I'm trying to imagine the amount of space that you currently use at fire station number 1, right? That's what we're talking about. And the $50,000 would be to refinish the floor or make it level. Are you utilizing all of the space currently that is available? Or are you going to be able to, are you trying to redo the floor so that you expand the area that you can have?
yeah, a little of both, where during the summer months, In the past, during the winter months, no, we couldn't use all that space because there were vehicles parked in there for the winter. Now that the vehicles are being removed, like the archery program, for example, we use almost that entire floor. But yes, we are trying to expand out and do more programs in there, especially during our summer kids club program. And when we have inclement weather days, we have to bring them inside, so
Gotcha.
they need that space as well. So yes, we will utilize the space more, and that was part of the thinking behind the floor.
Do you have any idea what percentage, like if you're using, let's say, 33% of the building now and the other 66%, did I say 33? And then 66%, let's say, was trucks. Are you talking about doing the floor everywhere? Is that what your idea was?
No, I was mainly looking at where the 5 stalls where the trucks are parked at now.
So you would be
What?
increasing your space,
Correct.
realization space by 50%?
Well, yeah, at least.
So it would enable you to run other programs that
Right.
you're not currently running,
Will give us an opportunity to expand.
right? And you,
Pardon?
I thought you were already using that space. You just said that you use that space all the time. So how would it really expand it if you redid the floors when you're already using it?
I'm talking about expanding programs that we can bring in there.
No, she asked specifically it would expand the space for programs. And you said yes.
he's I think we're talking about two different things. It was used as a garage for the
We
DPW.
said that it is utilized by the kids
In the
currently.
summer months, it is utilized, all that space during the summer months. During the winter months, we were restricted in space due to the fact that the trucks were parked in the building.
Further discussion?
On WebEx and asked if you could make a comment.
Sure. Chief Delane?
Yes. I was witness just the other day when I was there doing some IT work on behalf of the rec department, that they were utilizing the engine bay space for a toddler young child's activities, where they had a bunch of activities set up in that bay. And I did witness 2 or 3 children get their shoes stuck in the grates of what used to be our drains. And it did bring up some concern to me, watching them get their shoes stuck and them falling over. I understand with respect to there needs to be a future plan for that building. I just wanted to bring up to this board what I had witnessed while I was there.
Thank you, Chief. Further discussion, Trustee Warren?
So is the issue the drains, not the floor? So if we can get rid of or put a smaller grate on there so nobody gets caught in it, does that solve the problem?
Yes, it was all, for the time being, yes, until there are more set plans on the future of the building. That would help, yes.
Yeah, and that'd be a lot less expensive if we're just replacing a few grates. And I'd be all for that. Thank you.
Does that drain serve a function now? And does it go into the sewer or does it go into the stormwater?
The primary function of the drain would have been obviously the vehicles, as they came in after rain or snow. So as long as we were sure that the current use of that building wasn't going to change in the future, it would serve very little purpose. Somebody on the board may have mentioned filling it in with concrete. It's possible, I would think. I'd want to do a little bit more investigation, but
Stormwater or sewer?
I believe it is just draining out of the building currently. It's 1950s construction,
Oh, so
so
out into the grass,
out into the turf, yeah.
the dead area of the grass.
Let's try.
All right, thanks. Further discussion on the motion to remove the $50,000 for Fireman Park renovations. Only thing that I would add to think about is, when I think about this, is we're looking at removing something that is currently bringing us revenue that can bring us more revenue, and we're not as concerned with why we're putting 10-year notes on laptops. So, I mean, I would be more concerned with why we're putting a 10-year note on technology than I would on something that's going to make us additional revenues per year on a 10-year note, even if it's $5,000 paid on 10 years and he can expand the revenues within that building by 20,000, it's a win. But, you know, that's up to the board. It is borrowing, so it does add to the debt service. And right now at 6 million, almost 7, it's a little higher than I would like to see it. So if you want to start in $50,000 chunks, I guess that's one way to go about it. I'm just wondering the offset of the revenue is if it's worth it rather than buying computers that are probably going to be out of in 5 years, 7 years on a 10-year note. But that's me. Further discussion.
Where are the computers? Oh, laptops.
Trustee Chan Miller.
I agree with you, President Walter. After hearing Chief Delane, I don't want any children falling down. And if we can prevent that and use the money toward a plan to actually make it a full safe play area, I think it would be well worth it. It is, as you said, a revenue building for the rec department. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. Trustee Warren.
Let's reduce it to 10,000 and just fix the grates, and then you can do everything you want in there without any concern for the children. And then we'll figure out what we want to do with the rest of this facility.
Is that a motion to amend or just a comment?
We don't even have a quote for anything.
So I don't know what the cost would be.
We don't even have a cost.
Not a motion, it was just a comment.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion. Trustee Pieper, you have further discussion?
No, we don't have a cost. We don't even have an estimate. We have no idea how much it could cost. None. Oh, holy cow.
Further discussion. No further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Raise your hands. Motion.
You guys are responsible for this budget too. Hope you know. And I hope all the residents come out in full force.
The budget, that's why we're here. Other discussion on capital as shown. Trustee Jan Miller.
I'd like to tackle the elephant in the room, Division Road reconstruction.
So you're going to make some moves. Who's in charge of that one? Matt? You have a question?
Yes. I sat through some presentations and my understanding is, I'm trying to clarify, 3.5 million is for the entire project for Division Road?
Correct.
Okay. And I thought the plan was to do it in 2 years. Is that correct?
That is also correct.
Why are we borrowing 2 years worth of road construction?
If I can actually answer that question, you wouldn't necessarily borrow the entire $3.5 million. That's a separate action by the board that would take place at a later date. But typically when you're starting a project, it's good to have approval for the entire project at the beginning. So we could potentially borrow for phase one in 2025 and phase two in 2026, if that's the way the cash flow works. But, number one, I think for transparency, showing the board and the public what the full cost of the project is expected to be. And number two, just for planning the project, having the full amount authorized in the budget is important.
This is this, I thought we had some extra money in this, that there's some sort of contingency.
I wouldn't call it contingency. What was discussed through the Kapoor study and the public information meetings was sort of three options. There was a mill and overlay, which was kind of the cheapest option, also provided the shortest lifespan for the road. There was kind of a middle option, kind of a hybrid option where we did a pulverize and reconstruct and potentially looked at other improvements over this length of Division Road, like improvements to crosswalks, improvements that might reduce speed, improvements to the path, and so on. And then there was a high-end option that essentially,
Redid the whole.
yeah, is turning Division Road into an urban cross-section, a lot like Pilgrim Road is now.
Right.
So the middle option was strongly preferred by folks, and the public information meeting was ultimately approved by Public Works and Highway, as well as the village board. What I said at that time is just for the pulverize and reconstruct, we're looking at about 2.5 million.
Mhm.
But where we land on some of these other improvements, how much of the path we want to improve, exactly where these crosswalk improvements are. There's a whole range of things that we need to work through in order to really have the budget fully defined. So in order to capture all of those potential additions to the kind of the base pulverize and reconstruct, we're requesting that additional funding. And it could be that we get through the process and we don't need the 3.5 million. And that's where potentially, borrowing in two different phases would make sense.
Right, right. So, where in this, we have a couple of things going on in Division Road, and it's not only the road, two phases, I don't know, north and south, let's just call it north and south. And in the middle is the elephant in the room, which is Old Farm,
Mhm.
Old Farm Lift Station. And that needs a lot of help. So do you do that first or do you do a road?
No, I think what we'll likely do is a segment of the road first that doesn't include the Old Farm portion. And then the second year, by that time, we hope to know exactly what we're going to be doing with the Old Farm and be able to incorporate the improvements needed in Old Farm with that second phase of the road construction.
In your opinion, what's the worst part of the road? The north or the south?
My opinion is the south, most likely.
Yeah. Oh, you're living the dream.
The south?
So I thought it was the north.
Station line.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, there's
middle-
the one section in the south that was recently paved, obviously not that, but
Yeah,
north of there and then actually south of there too, there's some pretty poor conditions.
yeah.
If we're calling Jefferson Ditch or the lift station middle.
Yeah.
Which part of the road is worse? I would say as you go towards Village Hall rather than if you go towards county line. Right. Like Juniper's worse. I don't know what you guys do there.
It's bad.
It is.
If I'm trying to use the voice call on the phone, using your voice call so-and-so, my vehicle's rattling so much, it doesn't hear me, it doesn't understand.
What's enjoyable is when you get splashed from the car on the other side of the road that hits a low part and then it throws water on your windshield.
Anyway, I prefer only borrowing for what we are going to do within the year rather than the whole project. We can put together a, what resolution that we intend to do the whole road. This is the cost, and then this is what we're going to borrow this year and the next year.
I think that's what Administrator Krecklo was suggesting, is that we would budget for the project all in 2025, but there could potentially be borrowing in 2 different years.
Right, the board will make a decision on how we borrow for the project in the spring, when we'll come forward to you with a borrowing authorization resolution that'll list the projects and the amounts, and that's where you would see, and I think everybody's kind of in agreement on that if it's done in 2 phases, we'll only borrow for the first phase, the first year. And you would see that in the borrowing authorization.
And just to wrap up, what is the estimate for the lift station?
There's no estimate yet. We just had a study approved by a committee and village board to start to look in greater detail at the needs of the lift station. You know, pump sizing, is there space for the pumps? What do we need to do with the force mains? Some testing on the force mains to see if a redundant or second force main coming out of the station is needed, or if we can just increase the velocity through the existing force main. So once we have some of those answers, we can start to hone in on exactly what the design solution will be and come up with a budget, but it's premature right now.
Trustee Warren. Trustee Warren.
Off of Trustee Miller's comment, I understand the road construction part of it. Borrowing and debt service, that's like smoke and mirrors to me. So the first question is, in this 3.5 million, is PS&E included in that, plan specs and estimates, or is that a separate line item?
I believe there's a separate line item for that.
One for Division Road Survey and Design for about 10% of value of the replacement of the road.
I will say that in regards to the design, we're looking to do as much of that in-house as possible and reduce that design number, because we do have 2 civil engineers on staff now. So I think we can get that number down. It's likely that we'll still need some assistance, but you know, we are looking to save money on the project for sure.
So if everything goes according to plan, we probably first start construction, whatever phase 1 or 2, 2026, maybe?
No, I mean, I think it's possible that construction starts next year on the first phase.
All right. Okay, then it makes sense that we're talking about borrowing for it in 2025. I didn't think we could get things in place to do it that quickly, but.
It will depend on how the design process plays out over the fall and winter here. And I do anticipate coming back to the board with a preliminary design to talk about some of the ins and outs, some of those like, well, this is what staff is recommending in terms of crosswalk improvements and in terms of path improvements and so on and so forth, and get your feedback on, you know, how we line up with your plans.
Could bog you down as right-of-way acquisition, utility relocates.
Right-of-way acquisition is something that we're anticipating around the curve. One of the biggest items that we received feedback on at the public information meetings was that the path ended, and then there was about a 2 or 3 block stretch where there was no sidewalk before the sidewalk picked up again. So we would be looking at trying to acquire an easement or additional right-of-way through there to install a sidewalk.
As you know, that could be a 6-month process, just that. Yeah.
So I think those people would be very amiable, but we'll see.
You never know.
Yep.
So quick question for Steve. So I guess my whole point is I don't want to be borrowing dollars now when we aren't going to be using it for a year or two from now. I don't think we'd ever do that, right?
Right. I think, what we try to do when we start the borrowing authorization process is we'll talk with the public works staff and other departments about the timing of like when they're going to need the cash on hand, and we do try to delay that as long as possible, so that we're not borrowing until we need to actually issue that debt. And having said that, the other thing that I would add is that when we do borrow money and it is it's not being used right away, we do invest those funds, and that becomes a part of that pool that we talked about earlier when we were discussing the library funds. So that's part of that investment pool, and we don't let it sit idle. So what we try to match it as close, we try to match the borrowing as closely as possible as we can to the actual cash flow out the door. But when there is a gap in between, we do invest the funds and try to get something back from those.
Trustee Hudson.
So we're looking at the list of the capital borrowing, and here's what we've got. Out of these numbers that are presented to us, 72% of all the dollars are being spent on roads. 72. Another 9% is being spent on vehicles. That's 81% of the capital borrowing. So at this time, I'm going to make a motion that we proceed with this as written.
That's your motion. Need a second.
That's my motion.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Baum.
Yeah, before I do agree to that, the one thing I do want to talk about is the laptop stations and equipment for $35,000.
You've already agreed to it, so seconded for discussion.
For discussion, yes. But generally, we are paying for that out of
General fund.
general funds. Can we take it out of here and move it into there? What's the method for doing that?
That is an option, that the board could do that. The process would be to make a motion to remove that from the capital fund. You do have to identify money to pay for that in the operating fund. And one of the things you have available is there's about $130,000 in additional shared revenue. So that would be a funding source if you wanted to make a change. You could make a motion to move the laptops out of the capital budget and into the operating budget using, what's the dollar amount on that? 35,000 out of the 130,000 in additional state shared revenue.
So I'll make an amendment to the motion to remove the laptop stations and equipment for $35,000 and put it in a general fund paid out of the $135,000 of additional revenue.
And I would like to throw the recording software in there also, please.
The one right above that,
You bet.
$27,000? Okay, I'll
Thank you.
add that to my,
That, we'll go with that.
yes. You'll second my amendment to your motion? Okay,
Okay.
Or can we
Motion-
just amend the original motion and not?
that's what I did.
Motion made to amend and seconded by Trustee Hudson. Further discussion on the motion to amend. I'll go Trustee Warren, then Trustee Miller. Trustee Warren.
Like to hear our administrators' pros and cons on this.
Mike,
I would say I would support that change. I think in a perfect world, these are things that we should be including in the operating budget. I think when there's pressure on the operating budget, what you see in municipalities all across the state is that some of these things get shifted over to the capital budget. There's nothing wrong with budgeting for this in the capital budget. we issue 10-year promissory notes and we have an aggressive principal pay down, usually when we structure that debt. So, it's a little bit longer than some of the things that we include in the capital budget. But I don't think that it doesn't raise any eyebrows with auditors or bond rating agencies or anyone like that. So, it's acceptable to do it, to budget for these things in the capital budget. It's better to budget for them in the operating budget. You do pay interest on these items when we budget for them in the capital budget.
Right. And it impacts the levy.
Pardon me?
And it directly impacts the levy.
Yeah.
Through the debt service. Trustee Hudson.
Thank you.
So I'm looking to do this the least expensive way possible. And Steve, you mentioned something about $130,000.
Yes.
Is that 24 money or 25 money, please?
That's 25 money. So we, after we submitted the recommended budget to the village board, we got the final numbers for state shared revenue.
Yep.
It was $130,000 higher than what we had budgeted. So in essence, that's money that's available to the board. There's no really risk there. That's what the state informed us. So that's a solid number that you can count on bringing.
So the least expensive option for our taxpayers is to move some of these items that maybe you wouldn't traditionally call capital expenses up to that $130,000 level. So for example, the recording software should go, the laptop software should go, the 2 GIS for 15,000 should also be put into that pool, correct?
Those are all items I think would be appropriate.
Because that is truly operating, those are not capital expenses.
Those are, they can be capital, they're in a gray area. They can be capital expenses, but I would say those are everything you mentioned would be better budgeted in the operating budget.
The UPS?
No, it's hardware.
Yeah, that I think is something that
It's a battery backup. Let's call it what it is.
it is. It's an industrial strength battery backup.
We pay for it for 10 years with interest when we can simply write a check out.
Well, I mean, obviously, anything you can pay for cash is better. I do think that that's an item that may have a 10-year life.
Okay, I'll back up off the battery backup. So 1552, 1567.
Just a 52, you're at 87,000.
I've got 27 for the recording software. I have 35 for the laptops. That's 62. Plus 15 is 87, correct, right?
So 77. You got 62,000 with those two items, and then off of the 130. Oh, I thought it was 139.
No, I'm adding up to get to 130.
Right. 130, it's 135 actually. Okay, go. Keep going if you like. You have the floor.
I honestly don't see anything that is not capital in here. Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
So just to reiterate what you were discussing, you were talking about the GIS Payzer, and that's not part of the motion, but just part of your discussion point. So I've got it in my mind.
Yeah, what I,
Payzer, the traffic signal lighting, both for 7,500.
yeah, what,
And then the computers at 35 and the recording software at 15.
yeah, what I think we should do is
27, I'm sorry, yeah.
is to look at this list and spend up to the unexpected state revenue limit in order to get that off of the borrowing to save our taxpayers money.
And,
We're gonna-
and I don't think that's a bad idea, but there is also the opportunity for taking some of those funds and using it to drive down debt service and also directly impact the levy that way.
Okay, then I'll stop at the two prior ones that we've discussed, plus the two GIS.
All right, but that's just discussion because as the motion stands right now, it's just the two items.
Yeah, I want to change the motion to
You're gonna
include the
amend
two
amendment?
GIS.
I will change my amendment to add the two GIS.
Perfect, the 4 items.
Good discussion.
All right, so that's for a
As soon as
total
we
of
get a motion, we can have
77,000.
discussion.
My man. All right, minus the 135. 58 is left, okay.
And then I'll stop and thank you.
All right, so now the motion to amend has changed for everybody is to include the two items under DPW engineering for $7,500. And then also the computer laptops and the Eventide recording software at 27, which gives us a total of 77,000 subtracted from the 135 over, which leaves 58,000 available. Everyone clear on that? And we have a motion to amend on that and a second, motion to amend by Baum, second by Hudson. Discussion. Trustee Miller.
I would like to go with one of your Matt, your slides, and you had a suggestion for the $135,000 plus dollars. And one of them was we could allocate some of those funds to both the Park and Rec and the library to get their funds back up to the 2023 level. It was on, maybe not this week, but next week. We have another one. Increase funding for recreation and library. And we could take the 58,000 and divide it in half.
It's something to consider. It would need I don't want to amend the amendment again, because then you're
No,
starting to really
but-
lump a bunch of stuff under that some people might agree with and not agree with, and now you're
Right.
going to split on the vote.
But I'm making a comment that I would like to make a motion after we get through this motion.
Okay. I mean, I agree with, in the past, previous boards have looked at budget and removed from borrowing things such as, carpeting, office furniture, computers and software because of the limit of how they, don't usually last for 10 years. They're replaced, less than that 10 years that you're borrowing money for. So that has been a trend that we've gone with in the past, and I think it's a positive to look at this in that same way and to remove those items and use that overage correctly so that it is part of the general fund spending. Trustee Warren.
Matthew. So you gave us this nice little handout at the start of the meeting. Levy overview. Does this newfound money, this 130,000, was it figured into these numbers?
That was on the third option, so that third table, that was taking the $135,000 and reducing the general fund tax levy by that amount.
Okay, so that would go away if we approve this motion, from what I'm hearing.
Sort of.
Correct, 77,000 of that would go away.
Okay, because I'm all for lowering the levy personally, so, thank you.
Have available that you could go towards debt service is the remainder of what you have in your contingency from the public works building of 397,000, which is twice the 135 that you could use to lower that debt service with. So you could take your 58,000 plus whatever you wanted out of your 397 contingency and use that to lower debt service as well, which would make that number probably less.
Is that the first option, using the contingency?
No, the first option is as the budget was presented. So if nothing was changed, is that the second option is taking those contingency funds and keeping the debt service levy flat.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion on a motion to amend? No further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? One opposed. Two opposed to the motion to amend. That was to include those items or remove them from capital borrowing. Okay,
Up, what was the total?
77,000.
77?
Okay, motion passes. Back to the motion as amended. Further discussion. What was the original motion?
To accept this as is.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. Been a while. Okay, further discussion on the motion as amended.
I need a clarification. What are we voting on now?
You're voting on, the original motion was to take this capital as is, and then the amended motion removed the laptops, the recording software, the Pazer rating, and the signals of lighting out of capital and put them to general fund to be removed or subtracted from the 135,000 that we have as state funds over right now.
It's one or the other.
One or the other? What do you mean?
Or could you vote yes for both motions?
We already voted yes for the amendment, so now the motion includes the amendment. So anybody that would approve the motion or vote in favor of it would include removing those items from capital borrowing.
The entire, the whole, what Phil discussed?
Yeah.
The 77?
Yes. We would take that out of the total of 6,741 right now.
58, correct?
Leaving 58 out of the 135 that was part of the revenue sharing from the state, yes.
Right.
That we can still talk about
Okay.
of how we want to purpose that. Further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
One opposed. Motion carries. Trustee Baum. What are we on?
Steve, can you re-educate me on the contingency money? How much is in there? How much do you want to leave? How much can we apply to the budget? How do I put that into this budget?
The contingency fund for the DPW building has about $730,000 in it right now. I can't give you an exact number of how much we need, but I think that we could safely take 397,000 out of that contingency fund and apply it to debt service for the Public Works building, which would have the impact of reducing the debt service levy for 2025 by $397,000. So I think the way to the motion to do that, if you were looking for a motion, would be to reduce the debt service levy by $397,685 and pay that portion of the debt service levy out of the Public Works Building Contingency Fund.
I will make that motion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Hudson. Notice Trustee Jan Miller.
I was wondering if the person that made the motion, Trustee Baum, would increase it by paying off the debt service another 100,000 to make it 497, because there is 730,000 in the contingency.
I will not make that adjustment because I still need money in the two projects and we don't know what is going to be spent on those two projects. Once those two projects are done, then we can take the balance during the year and pay this down lower. So I will wait until a later date.
Would that be?
So two projects we're talking about, Division Road and the What else? And the DPW?
Tear down of the.
Oh.
Of the new D.
If I could suggest, there's a couple of ways that you could do that. You could make the adjustments during 2025 and amend the budget. Or you could basically do the same thing that we're doing now when we're preparing the 2026 budget. So if you leave $350,000 in that contingency fund and we end up only needing $100,000, that 250 could be applied to the debt service budget for 2026 and reduce the levy at that time.
At this point, I am not comfortable draining that down too much. I think the 397,000 whatever is adequate. So yes, I would wait until next year at the 26 budget and pull the rest of it out, whatever is remaining at that point.
Where's the 685 coming from? You said 397, 685.
That's the total increase in the debt service for 2025.
Oh, okay. Oh, so we're taking it all the way down. I see it. I got you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Huh?
Down to the penny.
You're good. You're very good. After you've been educated, you just take that information and run with it, don't you?
That's right.
Further discussion on the motion? No further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. One opposed. I have a question. So going back to the 3,500,000 for Division Road construction, has that been looked at in just a rough estimate by so many dollars per 100 feet, or is that a pretty firm number? Because there's no engineering to it yet, so there's got to be some up or down to it, right?
Yeah, there's definitely some up or down to it. The pulverize and reconstruct component of it was estimated based on feet, and that's the 2.5 million. Where it goes from there depends on kind of that menu of other options that are available. Improvements to the path, improvements to crosswalks, land acquisition for sidewalk and those sorts of things.
So as we get closer to actually approving the full amount of what is needed for 2025 in capital debt, you would have closer numbers in regards to the engineering and the Division Road reconstruction.
Exactly.
Okay. So right now, they're just placeholders, more or less.
Yeah, informed placeholders.
Okay. Trustee Jan Miller.
I'd like to talk about the remaining 58,000 in the $135,000. What do we call that, Matt? Use the thing. State shared revenue?
Yep.
State shared revenue.
I see what you're saying.
Uh,
Before we do that, just for clarification of the agenda, does that then off of that last motion that takes care of capital as a discussion? Just
Yeah.
for
We're-
commissioner's purpose.
We're
Then
on
we can go to the next item, which would be item B, outstanding items, and then we can
new business. Item
Yeah.
B is the
we can
next
then
item.
entertain what
correct.
you
Okay.
started.
okay.
Not shutting you down. I'm just bringing us on the agenda, and then the minutes would be for outstanding items because this would not any longer be part of capital.
Correct. Thank you.
Go for it. You're,
Go for it. All right. We're there now.
yes, we're there.
Okay. Outstanding items. I would like to take the remaining state shared funds that we did not spend. We spent 77,000 of the 135, which gives us approximately 58,000. Matt, you can do the math. And use item 3 under options for available uses, increase the funding for recreation and library, split the difference of the 58,000, 28,000 to each budget, which they were short. We're still trying to get them up to the 2023 budgeting. And the recreation funds itself, and the library could use additional revenue for actual part-time people. That's my motion.
That's your motion.
Didn't,
Motion
didn't
made.
we, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, motion was made.
Motion's made, needs a second.
For discussion.
Motion made, I need a second.
I'll second for discussion.
Motion made and seconded by trustee Cutts. Trustee Cutts.
I do think it would be great if they could get their funding back, but I would like to see us start saving some money and being proactive. I would like to have direct staff to start bring something to GGNF, present language to establish a capital reserve fund to be funded from earnings on investments starting going next year, so that we would put money in a fund that could build for things and build up for things we need, so we're not always having to borrow. And I think this, what's left would be a good start for that.
Further discussion on the motion. Trustee Hudson.
So correct me if I'm wrong. We've already restored the money that we cut from the library and the rec department.
We restored a portion, not the total amount.
So how much did we restore? So we cut each of those about $100,000, correct?
From the requested budgets, correct. We restored about $25,000 to the library and I think about $30,000 to recreation. I think the cut, not to get semantics, but the cut from the 23 budget to the 24 budget was 50,000.
The decrease in the increase of spending would be a more accurate way to phrase that.
Yeah, so we
And
refunded a
so,
portion.
so for their 24 ask, did we fund them fully for their ask this year?
For 25?
For 25, thank you.
No. No, we did not.
How much did we reduce their spending, please?
I think compared to their ask for recreation, it's probably in the ballpark of 30 to 40,000. And for the library, I don't quite recall. I don't know if the library director recalls. I don't recall the difference between what they asked for and what they're ultimately allocated.
As part of what was presented, we reduced it? Or from what you reduced it based on what they presented to you?
What we reduced compared to what they presented to us. They have an increase in funding from 24 to 25.
Right.
But what they requested for 25, what the recommended budget was less than what they requested.
Okay.
But Matthew, I'm going to assume the recommended budget for every department is less than what they asked for.
That is correct. Or it's flat.
Further discussion.
And what's
Sorry.
what's the motion again, please? To split the money 50-50?
Correct. 29,000 to each.
If it, may I speak?
I'm gonna go with trustee Warren and then I'll go back to trustee Miller.
So at our last meeting, we asked the library director to provide information, a comparison between 23 and 24, what the additional, giving them back the additional dollars, what does that equate to as far as additional use in the library? And I saw the emails from Matthew. I wonder if the library director could give us an executive summary. I'm trying to get at my arms around the additional money that we would spend to get them back to whole. What does that equate to as far as additional use of library facilities?
Sure. So you're referring to the statistics that were provided? Okay. So after the request was made at the previous meeting, we went through and looked at all of our numbers from 2023. So that would be before any of the hour cuts were made and any of the operational cuts were made. So just to summarize, items checked out, and these are all during the hours that were cut. Again, this is estimates. It's a little bit tricky to tell sometimes with some of these numbers. people who enter the building, did they enter right at 7:30? Did they enter at 5 and stay? So the numbers aren't 100%, but from what we were able to gather, there was about 17,000 checkouts. Again, checkouts do equate to additional dollars for Washington County. We get about, I believe it's about $3.50 to $4 per checkout if the resident is from a non-library community, so Richfield, Jackson, et cetera. That was the number of items checked out. People entering the building was about 10,600 people that were using the building for any reason during those times. Total public computer usage was 628 people. And then we also looked at program numbers. Again, this is a little bit tricky to tell, but all the programs that were cut, we estimated about 33,000 people that between 2023 to 2024 that we lost due to programming. And looking at what was cut, we did get about, Matthew, 25,000 for funding back. That is 100% of that money is going to part-time staff so that we can staff our hours back to our 59 hours per week. What was still cut and that we're still low on is in our operating budget. So library books and material, we had about $4,000 that were short on. Audiovisual material, 4,000. Programming was 10,000. And library system automation was about $4,000. So that's about $22,000 that we're short in operating. The additional 100,000 that Matthew talked about, we did eliminate a part-time position and then some other part-time hours in addition to the cuts for the operating hours. So we eliminated one of our part-time staff in our programming department and then some extra hours for other additional staff that we are still short on.
Mr. Miller.
That answer?
Mr. Miller?
So what I hear you're saying is that you're still short approximately 22,000? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Trustee Hudson?
Sure. I'm gonna have to ask you to explain one of your numbers.
Sure.
You said you lost 33,000 people for,
3,300 people for programming.
that's a different number. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Yep, 3,300
Yes,
people
all
for
points are
programming.
important. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that. Lots of numbers.
Mr. Baum?
So looking at the proposed budget, in 2023, we had $1,040,000 actual budget for the library. Original proposed for 2024 was 988,000. The revised number was 1,046,000. And the 2025 recommended is 1,039,000. So we are $1,000 behind 2023 and $7,000 behind the revised for 2024.
Did the revised include the donations? Okay, a lot of those numbers are due to library donations that we got. A lot of it went to our patio project that we used. So we fundraised $45,000 for that project. There was an additional 20,000, I believe, from our Friends of the Library that was fundraised. And I'm not exactly sure the total, but there's also several $1,000s for the library board that the board used some money to make up some of the operating.
So that would mean I would back you down to the original budget number of $988,000. And we are currently recommending for 2025, $1,039,000. So we're doing $50,000 more than we did last year.
Yep, and that includes salary increases primarily,
Correct.
and then the increase 25,000.
Get back to regular hours.
Yep.
Okay, further discussion? No further discussion. The only thing that I would add, and I can understand trustee Miller's passion to get the library back to full funded. She's been very clear and consistent on that all year. And so I understand where you're going with that, but I listened to trustee Cutt's suggestion, and in the many years that I've been on the board, it's the first time that we've looked at making any move to try to offset debt by building a fund. And I like that idea. I like that idea, and you do have this kitty in a sense to use as a seed and to try to start growing it from that. So I think it's a great idea. I'm not against funding the library. I think what we did last year was a tough decision, but we added police and fire department personnel to offset some of the cuts that we had to make to the library and park and rec. When public safety sometimes takes the forefront there, it was a need that this board felt that we needed to explore. And it was unfortunate the library and the park and rec department had to take some cuts to realize that. But I think what it also did for them was realize that they can rely on their people to look at other creative ways to make that back. And you've proven that with how you had your patio completely funded through donations, which is fantastic. It shows not only strong support for the library through the village, but also a creative way to offset the cost for something that is going to be, I think, really utilized from a lot of your people. So congratulations to that. And the same thing for Gil, came out with, a head on a profit based on some changes that you made within the programming that you had available through your outdoor music ventures, and actually, made some money back on that. Again, it kind of pushed you into that arena, but you guys, rebounded from it and came out in a positive way. So I'd like to thank both of your departments for, fighting what was a tough decision by the board, but coming through it in another way that was very creative and then ended up to be positive results for both of your departments. Trustee Jan Miller.
I think that we could probably do both. I think that what we need before we start funding is an actual procedure and a commitment by this board to do some saving, to put together a whole program to pay down the debt. I really do. And I was called on.
No, you're fine. Go ahead, trustee. Go ahead, Jen.
So I'm saying that I just like to reiterate that, yes, of course, the rec department and the library came through, but they can't, they can do better if they have their full staff. And that's what it's about. So rather than having them scrape and scrimp and do fundraisers, as you know, the library cannot charge for any of their programs. So they're not earning on every program. So I think it's just a great opportunity to get our residents out and use the services that we have. And it's state funded, and it's a perfect use for the monies. Thank you.
Further discussion? No further discussion? Trustee Hudson.
Just what's the motion again, please? Sometimes I forget.
Madam Clerk.
Use the $58,000 and split it 50-50 between the park and rec and library.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
I have about 3 pages.
So you were quicker than I was getting to it.
That battery backup. All right. No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion fails. Other outstanding items? Trustee Cutts.
I'd like to make a motion to use what is left of the additional state shared revenue to replace earned interest revenue in the 2025 budget and direct staff to present language to GG&F to establish a capital reserve fund to be funded from earnings on investments in the future.
Second.
Made by trustee Cutts, seconded by trustee Pieper.
Doesn't matter.
Louder. Discussion on the motion to approve. You're closer to me. My good ear. Discussion? Trustee Bone.
Just devil's advocate, if we don't get a good program, can we move this money somewhere else down the road? We don't get a program that we are comfortable with?
Yes, yes, you'd be able to do that.
Move it anytime.
It
Okay.
would require, you would have to amend the budget, but you could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? I think what we prove to our constituents every day is how well we can spend money. And I think this shows the direct opposite, that we're looking for the future to offset that, which has a direct impact to the levy. And I think it's a good positive move. So I commend trustee Cutts for bringing it forward. Further discussion? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Other outstanding items? Nada? No further outstanding items? What is that? I'm sure you don't have this calculated in your head, Matthew, of what that, with the reduction of what we're applying to, debt service, what that brings that mill rate down.
So actually, it falls in perfectly to the second option. So if you look at that sheet I gave you, that second, no increase in debt service levy, that'll set the mill rate at $4.54. On the back side of that sheet, you'll see what the mill rate, what the average assessed value is in 23 or in 24 compared to 25. So the average taxpayer in 2024 paid $1810. With the changes to the debt service levy, they'll pay $2,066, which overall is lower than what we had originally anticipated due to the referendum. So the referendum levy is higher than what the overall adopted levy will be in November.
That includes the referendum then?
Yes.
454?
Yes.
Interesting. So why doesn't it fall into the third one? Why it says no increase to debt service levy? We're not increasing it, we're paying it, we're decreasing it.
Correct. I meant no increase over 2024. So the debt service levy is flat. The third option decreases the debt service levy to flat and decreases the general fund levy by the 135 if the board goes that option.
So the third option takes the 397, 688 plus the 160, 135?
Correct, correct.
Gotcha. Okay. No other outstanding items? Then we're to item C, public hearing notice publication.
There will be one major change to the public hearing notice. They'll be keeping the debt service levy flat. Other than that, we plan on sending this to the paper either by the end of the week or early next week with the public hearing set for November 18th.
Okay, and then with those, with the public hearing and village board approval, if there's any changes to be proposed, which can happen and is fully free to happen, please come if you're going to reduce an area that you have or to add to an area, you have an area of which you're taking it from. So let's not just come with ideas that move to one area, you need to do both. and have it where it's coming from and where it's going to, or where you're taking it from and where you're adding it to. So it balances back out or reduces. So. Any other things? Nothing? Any announcements? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Have a good night.